Chamberlain was a giant.
You have no idea how physically imposing he was.
Strongest basketball player that ever lived.
He still inspires awe among those who watched him play or even heard about him. And even to this day, Wilt Chamberlain cast an enormous shadow.
Here we are, 40-some years later, and his name is still dominant in the record books.
A celebrated star at Philadelphia's Overbrook High School, Chamberlain captured the nation's attention at the University of Kansas. But when he entered the NBA in 1959, few could have imagined the kind of impact he would have.
I came to the NBA as a defensive player. I used to like to go up and grab balls right out of the air. So everyone was afraid of my defensive game, more so than my scoring game.
I think there will be a period of orientation for me across like it is for every newcomer in the NBA, but I think in the long run I'll be able to handle myself man-to-man with almost anyone in the league.
And from the outset, it was clear that Wilt would dominate scoring like no one else before him.
He averaged 50 points a game one season. That's his average, 50, every game.
His stature grew to epic proportions on March 2nd, 1962. In a game against the New York Knicks, Chamberlain did the unthinkable.
Whoever believed that anyone would score 100 points in one ball game, it was done tonight by Wilt Chamberlain.
I think they had no way to compare what I was doing. It was so far out of the realm of believability, if you such a word, that they had no way to compare. I mean, they'd come to a game, and people came to the game, they said, well, he's capable of scoring 100 points. And every night they were looking for 100 points.
Wilt Chamberlain of the San Francisco Warriors, the league's leading scorer for the last 5 years. Chamberlain made nearly 3,000 points during the last season, averaging over 36 points per game. The league's deadliest man under the boards.
But while no one had proven they could stop him one-on-one, Bill Russell and the Boston Celtics were clearly Chamberlain's toughest opponents. While Wilt was breaking scoring records, Russell was revolutionizing the art of defense and was every bit the dominant force that Chamberlain was. Their meetings would produce one of the greatest rivalries in the history of sports.
Go over the history of the NBA, the first 50 years, that's probably as dramatic a matchup as you've ever seen any time. It was like two titans of the game meeting, and you'd have headlines, Russell versus Chamberlain, and the papers and the fans and everyone played this up.
Wilt was a Paul Bunyan figure, mythic in what he could personally do. Russell, on the other hand, was part of the team, woven into the team more than anybody else ever in any sport whatsoever. It was just two entirely different ways. It was like I think when Impressionism first came into painting, and Russell was the great Impressionist painter, and Chamberlain was simply the realist, the best we'd ever had in simple, literal terms.
While he often had the edge in their individual matchups, Chamberlain was no match for Russell's Celtics. With their superior teams, Boston usually sent Wilt home in defeat.
When that happens, people start to look at one guy as the one who can't win, the other one who can win. Well, Wilt Chamberlain's teams were capable of winning, but they just didn't have the ability to beat those Celtic teams.
It was terribly unfair to brand him a loser. Runner-up to the public is loser. But to the people involved in the game, if you're playing in the last game played that year, you had a hell of a year.
In 1967, Wilt was able to exorcise the demons of his past defeats to Boston. His 76ers knocked the Celtics out of the playoffs en route to winning the NBA championship. But despite winning that title and another with the Lakers in 1972, Chamberlain could never seem to win the public's affection.
The expectations that people had on Wilt sometimes weren't realized because they literally expected him to just win every basketball game he played in because of the magnitude of the man.
His accomplishments on the court are so staggering they almost seem mythical. But the reality was quite clear that Wilt was the game's most awesome figure.
Wilt Chamberlain was the Goliath of his time. He was too big for the game of his time. had too many tools and too much arrogance for his time. And that would be what I would think of Wilt Chamberlain.